Hi guys, my name is Nithi. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna wrap up all the books I read in January. If you're new here, my name is Nithi. This is my channel, Books and Coffee. I make videos on Saturday and the occasional videos on Wednesday, and I hope you like the things I have to talk about. Anyway, so back to this video. I read 7 books this month, which is quite a lot in my case because I usually read like 4 or 5. I think at the beginning of the year, like I went through like 4 books pretty quickly, and then I read the other 3 very slowly. So that's how the 7 books came to be. So let's just get right into it. Also, I do not want to hear any comments. Oh, my bookshelf, it's a mess, I know, but I am moving in about like a week, so there's just no point arranging this, and you can't tell, but there's only like I'm only taking half of this collection. I unhauled half of the books that unhauling as in like I'm gonna keep half of the books here. I'm just gonna take the ones I really want to get to, because there's just a lot of books here that I probably will never get to it, but in my head I will always say to myself I will get to it. Anywho, so the first book I read, I actually started it in December and I finished it this month, so that is Just Kids by Patti Smith. This is a non-fiction, and Patti Smith is a very famous singer-songwriter, and I honestly haven't heard of her. I didn't know who she was until I saw Brit from Basically Brit reading this book and loving it. I don't think she knew either, but once I did my research on it, she actually is a really popular singer and songwriter, and I just didn't know. So this is basically about her life and her love, who is Robert Mapplethorpe, I think. It's basically about their life and how they came to New York, and with no money they had to live off the streets, and that's how they actually met while they were homeless, and they move in together, they start to build a life together. And of course, like, Robert is bisexual, so that is very interesting to read, because especially during that time, which is I think it's the late 60s and the early 70s, so that part I really enjoy, especially about, like, this is narrated by Patti Smith, right? So you see the struggle and how she comes to terms with the fact that with Robert's sexuality, just as he's coming to terms with it. It's one of those shitty situations when you're already in love with a man who also happens to be discovering his own sexuality. He's confused, you're confused, and because this is not fiction, right? Like, that's the thing I like about non-fiction books, is because this happened to somebody, and what goes in their head and the way they deal with it, it's very fascinating, because people are fascinating creatures. And of course, through it all, right, they make it together because of the love that they share, and it's just so deep and meaningful and very powerful that even though she's not the only person for him, it's beautiful to see how much they care about each other and how much they need each other, and that bond they share is incredible to read, and I felt really attached to them, and like, these are real people, but they actually felt like characters in a book, and I'm following along their journey, and it's one of those slice of life kind of books, right? It does read like a fiction, so this is not, if you don't like non-fiction, I would still recommend this to you, because of the way it's written like a story, but it's actually real people who experience these things. The next one is an audiobook that I listened to called What If You and Me. It's the second book to some series, I can't remember the name, and I don't have my phone with me, so I don't know. I'll put it here, and I'll put the book here so you can see the author's name. It's very similar to the Brown Sisters trilogy, where you don't necessarily have to read the first book to read the second and the third. They stand on its own. There's like this underlying, there are like characters who appear from each story. There's like cameo appearances kind of thing. So I found out later that this friend who was in What If You and Me was the main character in the first book, because this sort of takes place in this co-working space, and you follow along, like, each book is about one person working at this co-working space. So anyway, it's about, I'm very bad at names. Okay, it's about this girl who, I don't really know what this trope is. It's sort of like landlord and tenant falling in love sort of thing. But basically this girl who moves into the house, and the landlord lives in the same building, so it's just two separate apartments. But then he's a night owl. He can't sleep. Like, he struggles with like really crippling anxiety and PTSD from when he was a firefighter, and a beam falls on his leg, and he is crippled now. He had to amputate it, and then because of that he can't sleep, and he just walks around the house during the night, and then she gets really annoyed because of it, because she needs her sleep. And so that's basically how they met when she goes there to confront him. They're just two people struggling with their own past trauma, which normally I'm very hesitant to comment on, because sometimes the stories are written where the tragic past is a plot twist, it's a plot device, and it's like an easy way out where you just instantly make the reader feel sympathy for this character because of his or her tragic past, right? But this time it's very different. Like, I really like this book. I really like the past trauma and their past experiences made them who they are, and is very relevant to their own character development and to the story, so it didn't feel like it was forced. But she has a very creepy past where she was dating somebody who turns out to be a serial killer, and understandably she has trauma, and she has like trust issues, she has insecurities, paranoia from everything that she had to go through. The story goes with them trying to find love again, right? That's essentially what the story is. He's insecure about how he is now, and like that he's always thinking like he's unlovable, nobody can love him because he's a cripple. And one of the best things about this book is consent, and the writer did it so well. And I really like this guy who is constantly asking from her for consent for everything, which is, I don't know, for me, I don't know any woman who doesn't like that. But yeah, consent is very important. Even just to kiss you, I would rather somebody ask me before they do it. Maybe it takes the romance out of it, I don't know. I mean, yeah, some people do like it when it's spontaneous, which is fine, but I would say for a character like her, that was very important, because we know her past trauma and how paranoid she is. So for somebody to make her feel safe again, it's very important that they ask for consent, they make her feel safe, and he does that very well. And that character is written so well. It's one of my favorite love interests, I would say, in romance. So I rated Just Kids 5 stars. I normally don't rate non-fiction, but this, I rated it for its writing, because it's just, like I said, it's written so well and it's written like a story that I really enjoyed it. So I gave it 5 stars. I gave this book a 4 stars because it has that same element in romance which I didn't necessarily like, where which is called the third act conflict, I think. So it comes out of nowhere, and it's resolved pretty quickly, so that part I didn't really like. But yeah, it's a solid 4 stars and I really enjoyed it. So I highly recommend you read that one for a good romance, because yeah, I think after the Brown Sisters, this is one that I really enjoyed. And then I read a book that I really wanted to get to in 2021, which I couldn't. That is Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. This is the same author who wrote The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is one of my favorite books. However, this did not quite make the cut, but I still enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It's about a guy called Wallace who is a lawyer, and he is one of those, what's the word? He's just your typical guy who is he's a workaholic. He does not care much for relationships and other people's feelings. He's your everyday Sheldon Cooper, right? So the story starts off with him firing his secretary, and I mean, in true T.J. Klune fashion, this book is really funny. So I enjoy that the dark and this funny humor that he has. But anyway, yeah. So after that, I think after that day, he gets into an accident or something, and he dies, right? And then he goes to his own funeral, and he sees that nobody except for the partners of his law firm have come to the funeral, and like nobody really cares that he's dead. And then he goes to this tea shop, like the reaper comes and takes him to the tea shop, and that is where they prepare you for your afterlife. And the afterlife is supposed to be really good. And so in this tea shop you have your normal set of characters who are like very lovable and wholesome, and then you have, I think his name is Hugo, who is the owner of the tea shop, and then Hugo and Wallace develop feelings for each other while he's there, and he realizes that while he was alive he wasn't really living, and that he only learned to live his life when he was dead. This was a true TJ Klune book. I enjoy the characters, I like the story, but again I think it felt too similar to House in the Cerulean Sea, which is why I didn't enjoy it as much. So like, I mean, you've done it before, so why are we doing this again? That sort of thing. But I have to mention that I read the author's note here, and TJ Klune has said that he has struggled with grief and trauma in his life, and this was one of the ways that this helped him a lot in terms of like dealing with his grief, and I have to respect that. So in terms of that, he does write grief really well, and he has done it really well here. But in terms of like my enjoyment and how I was attached to the characters, didn't quite get there. I hope I'm not putting you off on reading this book, because I definitely recommend this to everybody. Like if you did like Cerulean Sea, you should definitely read this one, because it has that same wholesome feeling you get when you read a TJ Klune book. You know, it makes you happy, it makes you sad, it makes you laugh. So it's just, yeah, it's a complete joy to read his books. You need to like just pick this up and read it. So after that, I picked up a very interesting book called Tender is the Flesh, that I picked up solely after, can't remember somebody read it online, and I think it was either Gabby or Katie, this booktuber. So I read it, and there's a lot of trigger warnings for this book, and I gave it 4 stars, so don't judge me. But basically it's a dystopian story, right, where all the animals in the world contracts this virus, and that makes them poisonous for consumption for humans. And then not just consumption, like even a scratch or a bite is very fatal to a human. They can die. And yeah, very stupid human ways, we kill off all the animals so that we can survive, and then people slowly resort to cannibalism, and it's basically growing humans for consumption in slaughterhouses, in just like animals, and they are bred for consumption. So they're not called humans. It's illegal to call them humans, because making them humans would mean that you're consuming your own kind, and they don't wanna believe that. They're just a different type of meat. That's what I think they call it. They call it special meat, but it's basically human meat. So this book is very graphic, and it's not violent. It's just very graphic. And it really makes you think about what we do to animals right now, because it's not different, right? Whatever they're explaining there and saying that this is what's happening in a processing plant is basically what's happening now, except it's not humans, it's animals, and it's terrifying. It's something I would never forget. I don't want to read that book again, but I'm glad to have read it, because it opened my eyes. And there are some really good reviews on YouTube, which I will link down. I will link one below if you want to go into like an in-depth review about this book. That was like really fascinating to read, and he was able to put the book into words that I could in a way that I can't. So I highly suggest you go and watch that video if you're interested in this book and what it says, because it talks a lot about capitalism and consumerism and marketing, and how the government has basically brainwashed your mind through these television ads and like different marketing techniques to make it seem so normal that you're eating this meat and it's okay to eat it. Yeah, so it's an interesting read. Yeah, and I read it in like a day or two, because I couldn't put it down. It was fascinating. And there's a really great line at the end of the book, which is the last line of the book, which kind of like sums up the entire story for you, and she does it so well. Like when you read that line, you're like, just that sort of feeling. So okay, I give that 4 out of 5. The next one I listened to is also an audiobook, and I also read it on my Kindle, which is We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. This I gave 5 stars. This is a really small book, so the audiobook is like I think 4 or 5 hours, and it's one of those stories, and I think this was also it's an Amazon or Hulu movie on that. I don't know how good it is, I haven't watched it yet, but the book is fucking fantastic. It is, oh my god. It's basically you get a tornado warning, and then this very dysfunctional family gets stuck in a bathroom, and they have to wait the tornado out, right? But while they're there, it's basically shit just goes really bad. When they're in the bathroom, like the family, like they really hate each other, man. Like I've never seen such a dysfunctional family. They yell at each other, like the father's a fucking drunk, and everybody's scared of him. And then there's something happened with the daughter and her friend, and then you have this. Okay, so it's a little later now because my battery died while I was in the middle of explaining the story to you. So I had to wait for it to charge because I only have one battery for this. Anyway, where was I? Oh. Aisha was rudely interrupting me on the group chat. Talking about Jade Legacy memes because that's what we're buddy reading right now. I'll get to that later. But anyway, back to we need to do something. I was talking about the son, right? Like the daughter, she has her stuff going on with a friend, and then you have the son, which is actually kind of annoying, and he's a kid, so of course like he just can't be stuck in one place for like days, right? Because they are stuck in it for like days and nobody's coming to get them, and like things get very dark and very scary, which I know might be a little hard to believe, like that nobody comes to save them when they do live in they live in a neighborhood, right? So there are houses around. And also you're wondering whether some of this is real or if they're hallucinating, because you are reading from the daughter's perspective. So it's very there are moments in the book where you definitely know that she's hallucinating, right? But there are also times where like you just can't tell. It's so intense, it's so freaky. And the dad's like an alcoholic, right? So he's going through withdrawals, and the mother's in like denial, trying to keep everybody in check. And then of course like stuck there, right? So like they don't have any food, they're tired, they're restless, so sleep deprivation and hunger, that all mix in with like paranoia and hallucinations. And there's this really weird scene with the tongue. I don't want to get into it, so just read the book. Which to this day I don't know if it's real or not. If it's real, then it's fucking disgusting. And the ending is very open-ended, so if you don't like that sort of stories, maybe don't. I mean, you should still read it. It deserves all the stars. But just remember going into it that it has a very open-ended ending, which I personally liked, but I know some people don't. So then I did this collab with Inosh. It was a really fun one. We decided to recommend each other books that we really hate and we know the other person would hate, and we asked them to read it and do like a reading vlog, which I did have a link, both of our reading vlogs up there, you can check it out. And for that he recommended me one of the worst books I've read in my life, and that is The Devil Wears Prada by don't remember the name, don't even care. If you don't know, the story is about this girl who is fresh out of college, who wants to work at a newspaper publishing house, whatever. She gets this job as the editor's assistant at this very famous fashion magazine, and she has no interest or any sense of fashion at all. And thus begins like the story of like this really mean boss that she has to work for, who's like unapologetic and ungrateful, just treating you like a piece of shit. I mean, you've all seen the movie, I hope. I mean, if you haven't, you should definitely check it out, and do not read the book, just go watch the movie. But yeah, the entire book was a disaster. I gave it 1 star. I mean, for the sake of rating it, I rated it, but I would honestly not rate it. It's just so bad in all the levels, in terms of pacing, the characters, the plot, the relationships, or basically everything that happens in this book is completely useless, right? There's pages and pages of description and like a day in the life of this girl, and that's all there is to the story. Like you have a mean boss, you have a boyfriend who you can't make time for, and then you meet this other guy in your industry, and then because you both have like the same working hours and you go to like the same parties, whatever, and then you start to like hook up with him, blah blah blah, and then you later become part of this industry which you resented in the beginning. So that's the story, and there was nothing else to it. It's hollow, it's baseless. I don't want to talk about it anymore because I don't like to talk about books. It's not that I personally hated it, right? It's just bad. It's just bad writing, and it's bad character development. It's as if this writer just one day decided, oh, I'm just gonna write for fun, and then decided to publish the book. I don't think an editor has ever seen this book before it was published. This book is very problematic, honestly. There were some very homophobic, there was very racist and misogynistic comments in this book, which I really didn't like. Some parts just solidified the fact that this was written by a rich white woman. So yeah, didn't like that. If you want to know more and how much I suffered, which people seem to really like, you should definitely go check out their vlog. And the next book he recommended is Throne of Glass by Sergi Mas. With this, I DNF'd this one because I was just so tired from reading The Devil Wears Prada, and we only had a week to read the two books, and I started this and it was okay, but again, this is part of a series, right? So I didn't want to read the series. Like, I think I read like half of this book, like maybe 20 or 25 chapters, and that wasn't enough for me to want to read the series and continue with it. So I didn't really see the point in continuing with the book. So I DNF'd this one, but yeah, you can probably see more of my thoughts on this in the reading blog as well. And the last book I read in January is King of Scars by Liveradinithi. This is the first book in the King of Scars duology, and I gave this 3 stars, right? And we had intense conversations on this. Me, Aisha and Inosh, because they both really like this book, and not that I hated it, I did enjoy it. Like, if I give 3 stars, it means like I did enjoy it. It's just, it wasn't enough for me to connect with the characters, or the plot was very mediocre. So this is definitely an improvement to Shadow and Bone, but there were a lot of references to the original trilogy. So it's like this, right? So the story begins with the fallout of Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows, both the series, and everything that happened after that. And of course, like, Nina is still grieving from what happened at the end of Good Kingdom, and then that has sort of led her back to Ravka, and now she's on a mission for the king, and the king is Nikolai, who is still suffering from what happened to him in Shadow and Bone. And you have Zoya, who's a general now to the king, and she's somebody who's determined to save the Grisha and also make the second army stronger and give the Grisha a place, like a safe place for them to come back. But Ravka is like really struggling from the aftermath of like a civil war, and then of course like the constant battle between Shuhan and Frida. So all of that is still a big threat to the country, and it prevents them from developing. Like, you would think that after the fall is gone, everything will be okay, but the aftermath of the civil war has not made things better. So that part I really like. I like the political aspect, and I enjoy this world, right? I enjoy being in the Grisha. I followed the series, and I do really like Six of Crows. So it was just, I want to know what happens. I'm still gonna read Rule of Wolves as well, but the problem I had with this book is, I don't know, it may not necessarily be with the book, or it's rather the genre, which I've told multiple times that I've grown out of. So there were things in this book, especially in terms of stakes, right? The stakes are not as high in young adult fantasy as it is if you're reading like an adult fantasy book, right? So even though they talk about, especially for example, if they talk about the Darkling in past tense and how powerful he was and how much damage he caused and how people feared him, how they lost their lives, people they loved because of this war, because of his power, because of him, all of that. and I'm just sitting here like, Darkling was just a kid, okay? Like, I saw what he did in the original trilogy, and he is not the person you're talking about. I only have information that the writer has given me in the book, right? Nothing beyond that is part of it. So the Darkling in the original trilogy is not something to be feared, because he was just pining after Alina and then just wanting power. Like, honestly, Ben Barnes did a far better job of the Darkling than the character in the book. So when I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, this sounds interesting, right? This is really nice. It paints the picture of something that happened, something terrible that has happened to this country, that it's suffering from, right? It's continued to suffer from what happened in the past. But I know this past, I was there, and it's not as bad as what you make it out to be. The stakes aren't as high, the consequences aren't that impactful because of what happened in the past and what I read. I hope that makes sense. And I tried to put aside the fact that this is a different book and the original trilogy is like years ago and it's her first book. So yeah, in terms of like writing and everything else, she has improved, right? But if you're constantly referring back to that original story, that means it's still very much a part of this. So this story is very much connected and related to the Grishaverse, like the original Grisha trilogy. So it was very hard for me to just ignore that and take this as one book. So that was the first problem I had. And then it was in terms of the characters, which again, it's just, they weren't fully fleshed out, right? Especially characters like Nikolai and Zoya. Even Nina, like Nina didn't really have a lot to do in the story, and she did have her chapters, but her story at the end of it, when you think about it, is very little. She only had this one thing that she was doing, and it was just dragged on through the book simply because she needed chapters, and it was just filler content for most of it. But I still liked reading about it because of how well developed she was in the Six of Crows duology. So her character was really good in that was enough for me to go through this. So like, even if she was doing nothing, I would still read her chapters because I liked that character. But Zoya and Nikolai were not good characters in Shadow and Bone. Zoya had barely any page time or whatever, and Nikolai, I didn't like him at all. He was just a one-dimensional character in the second and the third one, and he's just this funny guy who we all know is hiding his tragic past with humor, and just, yes, he's a good king, you know, like he's somebody who always makes the right choice, the right decision. He wants to make the country better and save the people, save Alina, you know. It's all of that is, that's what I'm saying, like they're very one-dimensional in terms of, they're just good characters, right? They don't have any darkness in them. It's just they're dark. The darkness comes out because of what happened to them. It's like an outside force that's basically making them dark. For Nikolai, it's Darkling's magic that's in him. So stuff like that. So they're essentially good people. So you're instantly like liking them is very easy for you because their morals and the decisions they make are very good and they're pure. So those are very vanilla characters, and I think human beings are a little more complicated than that. So, and then of course with Zoya, it's a problem I have with a lot of YA female characters, is that very like just mean and unyielding and very intimidating for almost all the characters in this book. I just don't like it when women are portrayed like that, because that's just one side to them. Where's the other side to it, right? Sure, you can be all of that. That's like that's the strong side of you. That's the side you want other people to see, and you want, as a general, I get that. You have to be that. But then also, as a human being, you have to be, I don't know, you need to have like human qualities, like being kind or like being gentle and frustrated, or which I know is shown through like some of these scenes with Nikolai. It's just not enough, you know. Like, the best way I can describe Zoya is, imagine you're a person who's very open on Instagram, and like, you know, there are a lot of people out there who is very open about their mental health or their sexuality or the stuff that they believe in, right? And that's a great thing. That's fantastic. I love it when people do that. So they're very open about it. They'll openly talk about it. I know a lot of my friends and a lot of these people I follow do that. And so they will tell you a lot of the things about themselves, and they will put it up in their stories or whatever. They will share. So they do share a lot online. But then of course, if you know them personally, you know that what they're sharing is only a fraction of who they really are. That is my problem with Zoya. I only get the life that she's putting online, right? There's so much to her that the writer hasn't given us to read. It's just very hard for me to connect with that. It's more or less the same with Nikolai, but I think Zoya has more character than Nikolai, so it was more disappointing. I didn't get to see her character develop throughout the chapters, and I hope it gets better in Rollerballs, but I don't know. It could just be me who has a problem with the genre, and I know that this is something I've noticed a lot with young adult books, so it could just be like a part of the genre, because you know, she keeps yelling at me every time I bring this up, saying that it's the genre, it's how it is, and he's probably right. So, and you know, I know he's right. It's just that I can't help feel that way, right? Because I'm basically reading everything. So that is King of Scars, and I did give this 3 stars. So I would still recommend this if you are new to fantasy, and if you are caught up with the series and you're planning to pick this one up. I think you should. It's a good book. I think you will enjoy it better than I did. So it's not that this is a bad one. It's written really well, like objectively. I still stand by that 6 of Crows is the best fantasy I've read in terms of young adult, but it's also good, so do check it out. And if you are new to fantasy and want to give YA fantasy a try, I think the Grishaverse is a really good place to start. I still enjoy the world, that I have to say, like because of 6 of Crows and because of the TV show, like I love that world so much. So I do enjoy reading books in the Grishaverse. So that's it for January. There is a lot of books, and I think I talked a lot more than I usually do. I hope you got some good recommendations from it. I would say from the books that I read, I would recommend Just Kids by Patti Smith and We Need to Do Something. Those two I highly recommend you give them a try. And I'm currently in the middle of reading Jade Legacy, which you will see a reading vlog on, because this is, my god, incredible. Like, we can't stop talking about this. Like I said before, like we just constantly reading this, and this is one of the best fantasy I've ever read. I was afraid after the Deobat that I wouldn't find a good fantasy series, but even though I didn't like Jade War as much, I think I gave it 3 stars. But Jade Legacy is, it's incredible. It's making me want to read the entire series again, because I know it's gonna be even better once I finish this and read it again. So yeah, I'm just so happy. Like, that was a good final book, and I was afraid that I wouldn't find something like that again. But Jade Legacy is a really good final book. So more on that later, hopefully in the reading vlog. That is it for this video. I do hope you have a wonderful day, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you very soon with the next one.